A train love story. It was an ordinary Tuesday morning when Priya boarded the 8:30 a.m. train from the city centre to her office, her mind already tangled in the day's tasks. The train was packed, as usual, with commuters huddling into their seats, lost in their phones or deep in their thoughts. Priya, used to this daily routine, had perfected the art of finding a tiny sliver of space near the door where she could stand in peace, holding on to the overhead pole. But this morning, something felt different. As the train rattled along the tracks, Priya noticed a man standing near the door, directly across from her. He was tall, with messy hair that framed his face, and wore a worn-out leather jacket. He stood there with his eyes closed, his hand loosely gripping the pole, looking as though he was lost in his own world. There was something about him, something she couldn't quite place, that made her pause. The train lurched to a stop at the next station, and Priya instinctively took a step back, clutching the pole tighter. But just as quickly, the man opened his eyes and glanced at her. Their eyes met for a brief moment, and she felt an odd connection, a flicker of recognition that made her heart race. He didn't smile, nor did she, but there was something undeniably magnetic in that fleeting exchange. Before she could think more about it, the train started moving again, and the moment was gone. For the rest of the journey, Priya couldn't stop thinking about him. Who was he? Why had their brief eye contact felt so meaningful? She tried to push the thought out of her mind, focusing instead on the emails she had to send for work, but her thoughts kept drifting back to the mysterious stranger. The next day, the same thing happened. Priya arrived at the station a few minutes early, hoping to catch the same train. She was determined to see if he would be on board again. As the train pulled in, her heart skipped a beat when she spotted him waiting by the door, just as before. This time, their eyes met right away, and there was no mistaking it. There was a connection. He gave her a small, almost imperceptible nod, and she couldn't help but return it with a slight smile. This became a routine for the next few days. Every morning, Priya and the stranger, whom she started calling the man on the train in her head, would have their brief but meaningful exchanges. Sometimes he would look at her with a subtle curiosity, and other times she would catch him staring out the window, lost in thought. Neither of them spoke, but the silence between them was full of unspoken words. One rainy Friday, the train was packed, even more than usual. Priya had to stand near the door again, but it was more crowded than before. As the train swayed with every turn, she found herself pressed against the stranger. The proximity made her uncomfortable at first, but she quickly realized that he wasn't bothered by it. His calm demeanor helped her relax, and for the first time, she found herself actually enjoying the closeness. After a few minutes, the train lurched to a stop, and Priya's elbow brushed against his arm. She turned to apologize, but before she could say anything, he looked at her with a gentle smile. "It's okay," he said, his voice warm, like a soft melody that could calm the storm of thoughts in her head. "We're all in this together." It was a simple remark, but for some reason it felt profound. Priya's heart skipped a beat, and for the first time she really looked at him. His brown eyes sparkled with an openness that made her feel both seen and understood. She suddenly realized how much she had been waiting for this moment, the moment when their connection would move beyond mere glances. "I'm Priya," she said, her voice surprisingly steady despite the rush of emotions she was feeling. "Ravi," he replied, his smile widening slightly. And just like that, their worlds collided in the most unexpected of places. On a crowded train, of all places. The conversation flowed easily between them as they spoke about the usual things. Where they worked, the annoyances of rush hour, and the little joys of life. Priya found herself laughing at his dry sense of humor, and she couldn't help but notice how comfortable she felt in his presence, despite knowing so little about him. Days turned into weeks, and their brief conversations became a cherished part of Priya's daily routine. They talked about books they were reading, the movies they loved, and even their childhood memories. The train ride had become more than just a commute. It had become their special time together, a moment they both looked forward to. They began to text each other outside of their train encounters, sending short messages during their lunch breaks or after work. One evening, as the sun set and the train clattered along the tracks, Ravi turned to Priya and asked, "Would you like to go for coffee sometime? Maybe outside of the train?" Priya's heart fluttered in her chest.